The person you love isn't cold. They aren't unfeeling. They aren't broken beyond repair. What they are is someone who learned a very long time ago that feeling things deeply was dangerous. And so they built a system inside themselves, quietly, unconsciously, to make sure those feelings never reached the surface. Not with you. Not with anyone. And here you are, loving someone who seems to be fighting against the very connection you're both craving. That is not a coincidence. That is attachment psychology playing out in real time. And by the end of this, you will finally understand why. You wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is check your phone. Not because you want to, but because some part of you is hoping that today will be different. That maybe they sent a message overnight. That maybe something shifted while you were sleeping. And when the screen shows nothing, there is this quiet, sinking feeling that settles in your chest. You already know the feeling I am describing. You have felt it more times than you can count. You replay conversations in your head. You go back through everything you said, everything you did, looking for the moment you went wrong. Because surely there must be a reason. Surely something you did caused them to pull away like this. And the painful part is that you cannot find it. You genuinely cannot find what you did wrong. Because most of the time you did nothing wrong at all. And yet here you are, feeling like you are the problem. You have probably had moments with this person that felt so real, so warm, so full of genuine connection that you thought to yourself, this is it. This is the person. And then something shifted. Maybe slowly, maybe suddenly. The warmth pulled back. The closeness disappeared. And they became someone you almost did not recognize. Someone distant. Someone who seemed completely unbothered while you were falling apart inside. That is one of the most confusing and painful things a human being can experience. Loving someone who runs hot and cold. Someone who can be so present one moment and so completely unreachable the next. And the cruelest part of it is that you have seen who they can be. You have felt their warmth. You know it is real, which means you cannot just walk away and call it nothing. Because it was not nothing. It was something very real. And that is exactly why this hurts so much. You are not weak for feeling this way. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much. What you are is someone who gave your heart to a person who genuinely does not know how to receive it. Not because they do not want to, but because something much deeper than their feelings for you is getting in the way. And that is exactly what we are going to talk about today. There is a researcher named John Bowlby. He spent decades studying how human beings form emotional bonds. And what he discovered changed the way psychologists understood relationships forever. He found that the way we learn to connect with our earliest caregivers, usually our parents, becomes a kind of blueprint. A template that our nervous system carries into every relationship we have as adults. He called this attachment theory. And it is not just an academic concept. It is the reason you are sitting here right now trying to make sense of someone you love. Because here is what the research shows. A study published in the journal Developmental Psychology found that children who grow up in environments where their emotional needs are consistently dismissed or ignored do not stop having emotions. They simply learn to suppress them. They learn to bury them so deeply that eventually they stop being fully aware of those feelings themselves. And those children grow into adults. Adults who look calm on the outside. Adults who seem unbothered. Adults who pull away the moment intimacy gets real. Adults who look exactly like the person you are in love with right now. I have spent 12 years studying this. I have worked with hundreds of people navigating relationships with avoidant partners. And I have lived this myself. I was once on the other side of this exact confusion, watching someone I cared about shut down every time we got close, feeling helpless and completely in the dark about why. So when I talk about this, I am not reading from a textbook. I am talking about something I understand from the inside out. What I want to give you today is not a list of tricks to make your avoidant partner open up. It is something much more valuable than that. I want to give you a real psychological understanding of what is actually happening inside them when they suppress their feelings. Because when you truly understand the why behind their behavior, everything changes. The confusion starts to lift. The self-blame starts to fade. And you begin to see your situation with a kind of clarity that most people in your position never get. Today, we are going to go through the core psychological reasons why avoidants suppress their feelings, what it costs them, what it means for you, and what you can actually do with this understanding. Stay with me, because this is the part that changes things. Here is the first thing you need to understand. An avoidant person did not choose to suppress their feelings. It was not a decision they made one day. It was something that happened gradually, quietly, during the years when they had absolutely no control over their environment. And that is the part most people never realize. The suppression did not start with you. It started decades before you ever entered their life. Think about what it means to be a child who expresses a feeling and gets ignored. Not once, not twice, but consistently. You cry and nobody comes. You feel scared and you are told to stop being dramatic. You feel sad and the adults around you seem uncomfortable or annoyed by it. So what does a child do with that? They adapt. Because children are incredibly smart survival machines. They learn very quickly what is safe and what is not safe in their environment. And if expressing emotion consistently leads to rejection, dismissal, or emotional withdrawal from the people they depend on, they learn to stop expressing it. But here is the critical thing. Stopping the expression is not the same as stopping the feeling. The feelings are still there. Every single one of them. They just get pushed down below the surface where they cannot cause any trouble, where they cannot make anyone uncomfortable, where they cannot lead to rejection. And over time, this becomes so automatic that the avoidant person genuinely stops noticing they are doing it. It stops being a conscious choice and becomes a hardwired response. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, and research from Stanford University has shown that chronic suppression of emotion does not make those emotions disappear. It actually amplifies the physiological stress response in the body while disconnecting the person from their own inner experience. So what does this look like in real life with the person you love? You have a serious conversation. You are open, vulnerable, honest about how you feel, and they sit there looking almost blank. Not angry, not cold exactly, just absent, like they checked out somewhere in the middle of what you were saying. And you walk away feeling completely unheard, like you were talking to a wall. But what was actually happening in that moment was not indifference. Their nervous system was doing exactly what it learned to do all those years ago. It was shutting the emotional channel down before anything could get through and make them feel vulnerable. What this means for you is important. Their silence in those moments is not a verdict on your worth. It is not them telling you that you do not matter. It is an automatic psychological response that was built long before you came along. And understanding that does not make it hurt less immediately. But it does mean you have been fighting the wrong battle. You have been trying to break through a wall that was never actually built to keep you out. And this next point builds directly on that in a way that might surprise you. This is the part that most people find genuinely shocking when they first hear it. You have probably assumed that your avoidant partner knows exactly how they feel but is simply choosing not to share it with you. That they are sitting there fully aware of their emotions and consciously deciding to keep them hidden. And that assumption makes complete sense from where you are standing. Because that is how you work. You feel something, you know you feel it, and then you decide whether or not to express it. But for an avoidant person, the process is fundamentally different. They are often not aware of what they are feeling. Not because they are lying. Not because they are manipulating you. But because the suppression runs so deep that it has created a genuine disconnection between them and their own emotional experience. Psychologists have a term for this called alexithymia. It means difficulty identifying and describing your own feelings. And research shows that people with avoidant attachment score significantly higher on alexithymia scales than people with secure attachment. In plain terms, when you ask them how they feel, the honest answer is often that they genuinely do not know. Think about what that means for a moment. You ask them what is wrong. They say nothing. You ask them if they love you. They go quiet. You ask them why they pulled away. They say they do not know. And you have interpreted all of those responses as deflection, as avoidance, as them refusing to be honest with you. But what if at least some of those moments were completely true? What if they genuinely could not access what was happening inside them? Here is a real-life scenario that might feel familiar to you. You and your avoidant partner have a beautiful weekend together. Everything feels close and warm and real. And then Monday comes and they are distant again. You ask them what happened. They say nothing happened. They seem genuinely confused by your question. And you are standing there thinking, how can you not know what happened? We were so close 2 days ago. But from inside their experience, they felt something shift and their system immediately began suppressing it before it could fully form into a conscious feeling. So by the time you ask them about it, they truly cannot find it anymore. It went underground before they ever had a chance to examine it. What this means for you is that pushing harder for them to explain their feelings often does not work. Not because they are being stubborn, but because you are asking them to retrieve something their mind has already locked away. The more pressure they feel to access those feelings, the more their nervous system activates its suppression response. It becomes a cycle where your need for answers actually triggers the exact shutdown you are trying to break through. This does not mean the conversation is impossible. It means it requires a completely different approach than the one most people instinctively take. And I need you to stay with me here because this next point changes everything about how you see their behavior toward you. This one is perhaps the most important thing I will tell you today. And I want you to really sit with it because it reframes almost everything you have experienced with this person. When you feel close to someone you love, your nervous system relaxes. Intimacy feels like safety to you, like coming home. The closer you get to someone you care about, the more at ease you feel. That is how a securely attached nervous system experiences love. And it is probably how you experience it too. Which is why the closer you try to get to your avoidant partner, the more confusing their reaction becomes. Because for them, the experience is completely opposite. For an avoidant person, intimacy does not feel like safety. It feels like danger, not consciously. They are not sitting there thinking this person is a threat to me. But their nervous system, their body, their deepest psychological wiring is sending exactly that signal. Because as a child, the people who were supposed to be their safe place were also the source of emotional pain. The people they depended on most were the ones who dismissed their feelings, who withdrew their warmth, who made love feel conditional. So their nervous system learned something devastating. It learned that getting close to someone means getting hurt, that vulnerability leads to rejection, that the moment you let someone in, you hand them the power to destroy you. And so closeness itself became the trigger. Psychologists call this the approach avoidance conflict. It means the avoidant person simultaneously wants connection and fears it. They are not choosing one over the other. They are caught between two equally powerful drives pulling in opposite directions. They want to be close to you, and they are terrified of being close to you. At the same time, every single day. Here is what this looks like in your relationship. Things are going well. You are spending more time together. The conversations are getting deeper. There is a real sense of genuine closeness building between you. And then suddenly, without any warning you can identify, they pull back. They become less responsive, less present. Maybe they pick a fight over something small. Maybe they just go quiet. And you are left wondering what you did to push them away. But you did not push them away. The intimacy itself did. The closeness triggered their nervous system into a threat response, and withdrawal became their automatic way of restoring a feeling of safety. It is not logical. It is not fair. But it is completely consistent with how their psychology was shaped. What this means for you is that their withdrawal after closeness is not a sign that the connection was not real. It is actually the opposite. The more real the connection feels to them, the more their old wiring gets activated. The pulling away is often a response to feeling something genuine, something that scared them because of how much it mattered. Does that change how that withdrawal feels? Maybe not immediately, but it changes what it means. And meaning is everything when you are trying to make sense of someone you love. Now, this next point is something most people completely overlook. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Most conversations about avoidant attachment focus entirely on the behavior, the withdrawal, the silence, the push and pull. But there is something happening underneath all of that behavior that almost nobody talks about. And it is something that completely changed the way I understood avoidant people when I first learned about it. Suppressing emotions is not a neutral act. It is not like putting something in a drawer and closing it. It has a real, measurable physical cost on the human body. And avoidant people are paying that cost every single day without even realizing it. There is a landmark study from the University of California that monitored the physiological responses of people with different attachment styles while they looked at images designed to trigger emotional reactions. What they found was stunning. The avoidant participants showed minimal emotional expression on the outside. They looked calm. They looked unbothered. Exactly the way avoidant people always appear. But their heart rate and skin conductance levels, which are physical markers of stress and emotional activation, were just as elevated as the anxiously attached participants. Sometimes even higher. Let me say that again because it is important. On the outside, they looked completely calm. On the inside, their body was under the same level of stress as someone who was visibly falling apart. That is what suppression actually looks like underneath the surface. So when your avoidant partner seems completely unbothered by an argument that left you unable to sleep, they are not actually unbothered. Their body is registering the same emotional weight. But their psychological system has become so practiced at suppressing the outward expression of that weight that there is almost no visible sign of it. They have spent their entire life learning to look fine. And they have become extraordinarily good at it. Here is what this looks like in a real scenario you might recognize. You have a difficult conversation. It gets emotional. You cry. You express exactly how hurt you are. And they sit there looking almost completely composed. Maybe they speak in a flat, measured tone. Maybe they seem slightly irritated but nothing more. And you feel this crushing loneliness in that moment because it looks like they simply do not care as much as you do. You go home and you cannot stop thinking about it. And you assume they went home and felt nothing. But what the research tells us is that they went home carrying the same weight you did. They just had no language for it, no access to it, no way to process it consciously. So it stayed in their body as tension, as restlessness, as a vague discomfort they could not name or explain even to themselves. What this means for you is something genuinely important. The emotional gap you feel between you and your avoidant partner is not necessarily a gap in how much each of you feels. It may simply be a gap in how much each of you can access and express what you feel. That is a very different problem than loving someone who does not care. And it is a problem that has a very different set of implications for where things can go between you. Before I continue, I want you to think about your own situation right now. Think about the moments when your avoidant partner seemed unbothered. And ask yourself whether unbothered and suppressed might sometimes look exactly the same from the outside. Because what I am about to share next surprised even the people I work with closely. There is something that avoidant people value above almost everything else in their emotional world. And once you understand what it is, so much of their behavior suddenly starts to make sense. That thing is control. Not control over you. Not control over the relationship in a manipulative way. But control over themselves, over their own inner world, over what gets in and what gets out. And expressing emotion feels like the ultimate loss of that control. Think about where this comes from. As a child, the avoidant person learned that their emotions created unpredictable outcomes. When they cried, sometimes they were comforted and sometimes they were ignored. When they expressed fear, sometimes they were reassured and sometimes they were told to stop being silly. When they showed love openly, sometimes it was received warmly and sometimes it was met with emotional unavailability. The response was inconsistent, unpredictable, and for a child trying to make sense of their world, unpredictability is one of the most destabilizing things imaginable. So they found a solution. If I do not show what I feel, the outcome becomes more predictable. If I stay controlled, I stay safe. If I never let anyone see what is happening inside me, nobody can use it against me. Nobody can withdraw their love in response to it. Nobody can make me feel like my emotions are too much or not enough. Control became their emotional home base. And here is the painful irony of that. The very strategy that protected them as a child becomes the wall that keeps genuine intimacy out as an adult. Because real intimacy requires exactly what they have spent their whole life avoiding. It requires letting someone see you without the armor. It requires allowing another person into the uncontrolled, unpredictable, messy interior of your emotional world. And for an avoidant person, that does not feel like love. It feels like exposure. It feels like standing in the middle of a room with no walls and no exits. Here is a scenario that might feel very familiar to you. You are having a moment of genuine connection. Maybe you told them something vulnerable about yourself. And for a brief moment, they started to open up too. You could feel it. Something real was coming through. And then something shifted. They made a joke. They changed the subject. They suddenly remembered something they had to do. And just like that, the moment was gone. What happened in that moment was not them deciding you were not worth opening up to. What happened was their internal alarm system firing. They felt themselves losing control of their emotional expression. They felt something real about to surface. And every instinct they have, built over decades of self-protection, kicked in to shut it back down before it could fully emerge. The joke was not casual. The subject change was not random. Those were precision tools of emotional self-regulation. Ones they have been using since childhood without even being fully aware of it. What this means for you is that those almost moments you have shared with them are more significant than they might appear. The fact that something started to come through, even briefly, even if it got shut down immediately, tells you that the feeling is there. It exists. It is real. The suppression is powerful, but it is not perfect. And in those cracks, however small, you are seeing the truth of what they carry inside. If nothing else from this video, I want you to remember this one thing. An avoidant person shutting down in a moment of genuine connection is not rejection. It is fear wearing the mask of indifference. And fear, unlike indifference, means something is genuinely at stake for them. Now, this next point is one that most people in your situation have never considered. And it reframes the entire dynamic between you in a way that I think you need to hear.